It's March 2024 and I have travelled out to Lisbon in Portugal to see Ultimate Audio, whose premises you can see there behind me. And I'm here for the Ultimate Sessions Extreme HiFi event, with Extreme really being the epitome of what this event is all about and what Ultimate Audio are trying to show. Very extreme, high performance hi-fi systems. But really this video has been inspired by a friend of mine, Graham, who recently was able to buy his dream hi-fi system following receiving an inheritance. And I think that's a very special thing because we only have one life and it's far too short for us to not fully indulge in our passions if we of course are able to. But what does a dream hi-fi system even look like? And that's what's amazing about this event. The guys here have phenomenal facilities, credit where credit's due. Ultimate Audio really have a fantastic demo facility here with excellent demonstration rooms. But beyond that, they know hi-fi systems and they know phenomenal sound quality. Absolutely outstanding sound. So if you live in this part of the world, this is definitely an event I would recommend that you come to because, you know, there's really a lot here to see, listen to and learn, of course, about sound. But this video is going to be about me showing you those systems, telling you a little bit about those systems, and some of the manufacturers are here, so I'm going to be speaking to them as well. This is going to be an outstandingly good video. Okay, so behind me there is system number one, and it's difficult to contain my excitement for this system actually, but to know where to focus that excitement initially, you know, what grabs my attention first, because you can't obviously miss the brand new G3 mezzo speakers from Avantgarde Acoustic. It's just something about a horn speaker and the way visually it grabs your attention. It is, you know, it's really stand out, really very striking, especially with a slightly larger form factor like this with the Mezzo 3. They really do grab your attention, but that's not the only thing that grabs your eye, I think, with this system. That gorgeous Kondo Ongaku integrated amplifier and the way those tubes glow. Not all tubes have that lovely visual aesthetic, so that really grabs my attention. And then, of course, above that, on the top shelf, is the Lampsiator Pacific DAC, which has, I think, 5 tubes in it, which is pretty extreme considering the size of those tubes for a DAC. It's definitely not something that you see every day, and the physical size of that DAC is also really something. Of course, next to that is the much more modern-looking Tyco Extreme, but down to the bottom left of the system is the AccuPhase CD player and AccuPhase power conditioner. I didn't even know AccuPhase made one of those. Despite all of that really gorgeous, very eye-catching, really striking hi-fi system components, the one that's really grabbed my attention and the one that's got me probably most excited just purely for the visual aesthetic of it is that turntable from the company, I assume you pronounce it Two.One Audio. Not sure, it's not a company I've ever heard of before. I looked at their website before coming out here and they've got some beautiful photos, not a huge amount of information. So I'm here with Jerome from Avantgarde Acoustic, and you guys are making a pretty big statement here at this show this weekend, showing to the world for the first time the brand new G3 Mezzo speakers. And Jerome, I was listening to these yesterday and they were sounding literally phenomenal. I was amazed for about the hour or two that I sat there. So I just thought I'd ask you, can you tell us a little bit about them and maybe what makes them a little bit extra special from previous Avantgarde Acoustic Mezzo speakers we've seen before?
So the Mezzo G3 is a new statement in our line. The fundamental of Avantgarde horn speaker with a very high efficiency. The horn will help to spread out the air particle into motion directly into the listener position with a big precision. We use a new super tweeter, which is now, compared to the former generation, in much higher frequency available. And we use two new subwoofers drivers that are 12 inches, made with a very special combination of Kevlar, carbon fiber, paper. And this new mezzo is very special in some points. Number one, we have this especially new horn-shaped bass that will help to, a little bit like the trio, to spread out the low frequency into the room. So not only front, but also wrapping you around with bass. This is very important. The second thing is that we use some very expensive trio tweeter. Also, the mid-range technology has been derived from the trio, and the amplifier, the DSP, all these ingredients made this product very special.
What stood out to me, Jerome, yesterday when we were talking off camera is that the new mezzo is now like a mini trio to some degree. But one of the things that I was trying to wrap my head around was like the dual bass system. So there's a horn bass at the front, but also down firing, all actively controlled. So what are the benefits to having both of those bass systems in the same speaker?
The former Mezzo XD was a closed enclosure. And since we designed the new trio bass horns with new drivers, they were designed to work with a horn funnel, and they were extremely powerful. They use 1.15 Tesla magnetic field on the back. They use a long excursion membrane and suspension. Thus, when we put those drivers in a mezzo new enclosure, the G3, we found out that they were so much energetic and could have so much potential for also having more than just a closed enclosure. We found out that tuning them with a down-firing bass reflex was giving us not only the punch, but also this mini trio feeling of having the sound not only coming directly to you, as I said, but also filling the room with energy. And this makes, when you listen to this mezzo compared to a Duo GT, for instance, a huge step ahead in terms of feeling. The bass is not only coming to you, it is, but also it is wrapping you around. That's the huge difference.
So one last thing would be, I mean, obviously I've listened to, Avantgarde horns a few times now, and they always leave a mark on me. But if somebody's new to these types of speakers, what makes them stand out compared to other speakers on the market?
If I said three things, and I like to do jokes, I would say dynamic, dynamic, dynamic. But it's not only this, but dynamic is really what we can say. This speaker is dynamic in the sense that you have the feeling of the music, what is everybody's trying to reach, but here we are doing it with some kind of likeness, which is pretty unique. The second thing is now that because of, thanks to the new tweeter, which is a super tweeter going up to 28,000 hertz, we have totally unleashed the mid-range, the high mid-range and the tweeter part. So the high frequency and the mid frequencies are much more unleashed and much more natural. You don't have this feeling at all anymore of sometimes some harshness or of some kind of projection to you. You have a natural likeness and very dynamic speaker. This is what I would say as a resume.
I just want to say thank you for coming on camera. Thank you very much. And, thank you for inviting me to let me have a listen. It's been amazing. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the sound quality of this system, or just the key things that really stood out to me. Firstly was the size and scale of the sound. That's something that you kind of expect from large speakers, but the way Avantgarde horn speakers present a scale and size of sound, it's definitely different. It's definitely a different way of presenting music compared to what I'm going to call a more traditional speaker. And interestingly, you think that the giant horn on the top, which is responsible for mid-range, you think that would throw the sound out into the room in a really spread the sound kind of fashion. But speaking to Jerome about the design, he told me that it's actually the opposite. The horn actually kind of channels the sound towards the listener rather than spreading it all around, which is really very interesting. I think the thing that stood out to me most was the bass and the bass quality. This is quite a large room we're in. It's very well professionally designed, acoustically treated listening room. But where I was sitting was actually slightly further back, slightly behind the optimum listening position. And there was slightly more bass, I think, as a result. But the bass pressure and the way it was just filling the room and just kind of lighting up the room in terms of a feeling of warmth and pressure and bass that was spread so lovely around the room, perfectly evenly from left to right. And it would kick you at times with certain music, or it would just be this wonderful, lovely underpinning to the music. And that meant that the vocal that could be presented sat just delicately, so delicately on top of that bass. But occasionally there'd be some music that was played that was quite a bass-like recording, and the vocal could come through with a little bit more attack. But it would still just be this lovely, delicate thing that just hung there in the centre of the soundstage. But then the treble detail was really quite lively, but also soft and delicate at the same time. A really nice mixture of the two. So for me, the big pro of this system is that it can create a really large, energetic, lively, very dynamic sound with real ease, you know, using maybe 1 or 2 watts from an amplifier. So everything sounds really relaxed, really smooth, and really soft and really sultry, but still explosive and dynamic at the same time, with a really full, very full, warm bass. And I just like the feeling, the warmth, the pressure feeling that you get on your body, but with no negative side effects for that. And just the overall cohesion of the sound of this system here is probably the best avant-garde system that I've heard from that point of view, the kind of the way the whole sound is knitted together and balanced across the whole spectrum. So that's been what's really stood out to me about this system. Now, when I talk to you about the other systems, I'll go through the pros and the cons, because what we've got here is a real contrast, I think, in terms of different ways of presenting music. So this is kind of my reference point. This is the system that I listened to first. I spent several hours listening to it yesterday, so long my watch told me I needed to stand up, and I was just riveted to the seat. I enjoyed literally every single second. Beautiful second after beautiful second. So behind me then is system number 2, or maybe you could call it system 2.1, because the guys at Ultimate Audio have been changing the speakers between the Audionec EVO 2 that you can see in the system at the moment and the Rockport Avia 2, which you can kind of see just behind me, behind the speakers over there. But visually, what is it about this system that maybe grabs your attention? It's difficult to see past the Audionec speakers, isn't it? Because they are such an unusual design. I've never seen a speaker like it. But sometimes I think designs of things in hi-fi can be different for different sake. This design actually makes a hell of a lot of sense, more when you listen to it actually than when you just think about it, because some of this is difficult to get your head around. But when you listen to it, like I said, it makes sense. But also, how can you look past the absolutely stunning clear audio turntable with the DS Audio Grandmaster cartridge on there with the, I think it's an equalizer system as opposed to a phono stage, but like the dual casework of that. I really like that DS Audio casework. I think it's particularly nice. And of course you have the Griffin, Apex and Commander pre and power amplifier. You can't see past the giant Griffin pure class A power amplifier. That really is the epitome of a beast in hi-fi. It's absolutely enormous. The source for this system is an Inuos Statement Next Gen music server with a Playback Designs CD player and DAC, a brand that I'm not familiar with, but I'd like to get more familiar with them after listening to this system yesterday. So let's talk about the sound of this system. And to me, it's been a really interesting one, because in the same room, on the same system, I've been able to appreciate two very different sound, and I'm going to call them performances, because that's what this system with these speakers really deliver. It's a full-on, musical performance in a lot of ways and a lot of key areas, which it should be, of course, with hi-fi at this kind of level and price. But let's start by talking about the sound quality of the Audionec EVO 2 speakers. I've never heard a speaker present music quite like how these do. because when I looked at this as a design, I assumed the whole mid-range driver super tweeter array would be to try and give a speaker more of a panel type of sound. And a panel type of sound speaker is very free of the cabinet because there is no cabinet. So you get this lovely airy, very spacious kind of sound. And that kind of is what they're doing here, but there's more to it than that, because what I'm going to call the density of sound, the fullness, the body, the amount of kind of thickness to the sound. Thickness is not necessarily the right word, but hopefully you can understand my description there. It's like how dense the sound is from left to right going back in the soundstage was much, much more substantial than I was expecting from this kind of speaker design. Definitely more substantial than I've heard from panel speakers in the past. So that was really interesting to me, because it meant, listening to classical, for example, the instruments in that had real body and like texture and real fullness to them, but still with the spaciousness that you would get with a panel speaker. So that was really interesting. Then I asked for the guys to play something with vocals, and I think they put on some Johnny Cash, and wow, I've never heard vocals presented like this before, set very back in the soundstage, and enormous, absolutely enormous. Like, I'm just going to step back in the camera, I don't think it will track me, but imagine a vocal that's kind of filling this whole area with this lovely rounded 3D holographic vocal. Now, some audiophiles might find that to be maybe a little bit too extreme or a little bit exaggerated, but the presentation was just very sit there and just listen to it, and a little bit concert-like, but a bit more rounded and warm and nice. So the Audionec EVO range of speakers are unlike any other speakers I've ever seen before, and that's largely because of what is essentially what you think is the mid-range driver, but really it's quite a wide-band driver. This duopole 31 driver is responsible for frequencies from 400 Hz up to 10 kHz. So that's actually going quite high into the treble region. But the treble is then supported by a soft dome, which is really interesting, a silk dome super tweeter. So actually having a silk dome, soft dome essentially, super tweeter on a speaker is also something really different. But the way the mid-range driver, or essentially the wideband driver in these speakers works is really unbelievable, because when you look at it in the flesh, it's impossible to see how that might even create sound. And another cool thing about these speakers is that the frame system that you can see either side, that is where all the cable runs go to link all the individual speaker cabinets together. So like, you look at these speakers and you look at the design and think it's really quite unusual, really quite quirky. But a lot of it actually makes a lot of logical sense, such as having, a dedicated cabinet for this specific bass driver, a dedicated cabinet for this specific bass driver, and that means they don't interact with each other. So these are very, very unusual speakers, but I like them. I think they're really quite novel design, and size-wise, they're not absolutely huge. So I think audiophiles could have these in fairly realistic size rooms, much more realistic size rooms than obviously very large horn speakers. But then the stark contrast difference with the exact same hi-fi system with the Rockport speakers. That sound was like really precise, really articulate, really open and really organized. A deeper soundstage, a more precise soundstage, a more specific soundstage. Very like full and powerful and dynamic and very strong. I'm going to use the word strong in terms of sound. So very like authoritative and powerful, and everything was precise, but still with really nice tonal qualities and roundness and the things that audiophiles appreciate, that tone, fullness, good quality bass, and a very wide soundstage. They seem to throw the sound out. So it was a real mixture of maybe a bit more of a live sound, a little bit more of a raw sound. But both of these speakers, I think, have slightly more delicate, slightly more easygoing top ends. So that means that there can be this energy, that can be this life, but there's never any hardness, never any aggression. So there's a really big difference between the two speakers here, presentation-wise. And You know what? I kind of like them both. I like them both for the different reasons, as you might expect. And then comparing them to the other systems here, which is really interesting. Of course, comparing them to the big horn systems, neither of the systems here give you that same kind of, big enveloping sound, not quite the same live event type sound that you get from the horn speakers. That aspect those horn speakers do very well. However, the horn system didn't give the sound quite as specific and spaciousness and organization, and kind of like what I would call like a low noise floor. So there's a low noise floor, so everything's nicely spaced out and organized. Tough choice to choose between these. All excellent systems, really, all delivering, to a very high level. Which you might prefer. Let me know down below in the comments section. So behind me then is, of course, system number 3. And what doesn't grab you visually about this system? I really like the contrast of it, the way it all kind of blends together visually, colours-wise, and how it all is offset by the nice hi-fi rack that the system is on. And it actually all colour coordinates really well. Everything just looks like it's potentially even from the same manufacturer, which of course it's not. Personally, I particularly like the way the WADAX, reference DAC and music server, and the power supplies on the bottom shelf, how that stands out. It really pops. The silver, the way the lighting is in this room really makes that gear really pop off of the rack, I think. But it also visually matches with the Marten, Mingus, Septet speakers, which is really very interesting from a visual point of view. And then the Octave brand new Jubilee preamplifier and power amplifier, I think, are really quite understated in their visual approach, especially as the tubes that are in the power amplifiers are covered over with a cage, and it's actually really quite difficult to see them, which in a way is a little bit of a shame, because there's not one, there's not two, there's actually 8 KT170 tubes per monoblock amplifier on the top. So it would have been lovely to be able to see them. And that means that this big, very tall rather than deep, it's quite deep actually, but obviously more tall than it is deep, power amplifier can deliver, I think, 400 watts into 8 ohms per channel. So it's a very powerful tube amplifier. So I'm here with Martin from Marten Speakers. So Martin, you must have been born to do this job, being Swedish, of course, as well. And you guys are showing your newest speaker, a very, very high-end speaker. But I think it's in quite what I'm going to call like a normal footprint, like a normal room size footprint, which is possibly perfect for this kind of size of room, which similar to my size room, Martin, which is hint, hint. What makes these speakers special, please?
This was, for us, the 25th anniversary. As you said, it's quite sleek. It's still a big speaker, but it doesn't give you that appearance. It has a narrower front. Of course, the narrow front gives less interaction, less interference in the sound. It has a wider back, which gives us the proper volume of the cabinet. It also gives us the opportunity to put bigger passive drivers, because when you have this design with passive drivers, they need to be at least 30% bigger than the drivers in front. So here we have 10-inch drivers in the back, we have 8-inch drivers on the front. This was also a completely new design of our diamond tweeter that we use on top, together with a very, very cool mid-range driver. So as you can see, this is a 3-inch beryllium dome working flawless together with the diamond tweeter. We also have a newly designed ceramic lower mid-range driver, which is 7-inch. And that is then working together with the 2 8-inch aluminium sandwich cone drivers in the base. So actually 4 different materials in the drivers on the front. When it comes to the Marten isolators, as we call them, it is something we work on together with ISO Acoustics. The thing with the Marten speakers is that, of course, the isolators are perfectly tuned to the weight of the speakers. So in this case, the Mingus Septet weighs in at 95 kilos, and the isolators are then fine-tuned for exactly that weight. And then, of course, we have the amazing crossovers. And what Leif, our chief designer, has been working with for a long time now is what we call a first-order crossover filter. This, with these drivers, gives us the opportunity to have music centra of all the drivers, which means that all of the different frequencies reach your ears at the listening position at the same time. So there is absolutely no time delay or anything like that, which gives you a totally distortion-free sound.
One thing I want to ask you is, if somebody watching this video is new to Marten speakers, how would you characterize the speaker's sound?
So to begin with, since we're using either a diamond tweeter or in the entry-level speakers a ceramic tweeter, we are aiming for a very, very high resolution, no distortion, very fast, very powerful bass, but still a natural sound.
Marten, I've just got to say thank you very much for coming on camera, talking to me. I really appreciate it. Thank you. What has really stood out to me about this system is the contrast of it between Systems 1 and Systems 2. That to me is the real interesting part, because this system here really reminds me, or really makes me feel like it's a bit of both. It's like some of the best of System 1 and some of the best of System 2, which of course could be really appealing to a lot of people. And the listening room that we are in actually feels more real, very real world size. It actually feels very similar to my own personal listening room. So it's quite a smallish listening room, and yet all of these really big, very high-end, aspirational components can work fantastically well in this size room. And the sound quality this system has been delivering has been really inspirational to me personally, because it shows that exceptional sound quality is achievable even in smaller rooms like this. So this system doesn't have quite the same size and scale and effortless of size and scale that you get from the big Avantgarde horn speaker system, but I think it was actually sounding a little bit tighter, a little bit more focused. So like there's more information potentially happening between the speakers. Yes, it's a little bit more condensed together, but like the precision of the sound was really striking, and the speed. And because it's very, very fast, you feel like you're hearing more details between the notes, more subtlety between the information, or just the way the information is being, or the soundstage really, I suppose, is being presented. And it was very, very fast. We listened to some dynamic music, which had a really, what I would call a very three-dimensional soundstage, sound going away from you, sound coming out into the room. And the precision, the perfection of all of those samples or sound notes in that music was absolutely outstanding, really outstanding. And then there was some big hitting bass that was hitting me fantastically well in the optimum listening chair. I was super impressed by the power and the speed and the articulation and the detail, and also like the bloom of the bass as well. So it's not like dry, it's nice and rounded and nice and pleasing. And the vocals was really interesting, because you would think in a room this size with this type of system, maybe the vocals would be really quite forward and attacking, but it was really the opposite. They just sat nicely back in this, slightly maybe a little bit too back maybe for some people, but it was just nice, pleasant vocals. And interestingly, sometimes in the music, that the density of the music would just relax and then the vocals would come through. Like that is how it's been designed for you to hear it. Very impressive stuff. But I think the bit that really stood out to me about this system was the high frequencies, the upper energy or the speed of the highest vocal region, and also the treble information. I would say it's maybe the most precise and maybe the most clear of all of the three systems here. Like the way you'd hear that high frequency information was just a little bit more lit up, would be how someone would describe it. So a bit clearer, a bit more lively, a bit more lit up, and that gave this system a bit more, I think, energy and a bit more kind of an upfront nature to it. So, it makes you want to sit forward and listen more so definitely than the big Avantgarde horn system. Whereas this system has a little bit more edge to it, a little bit more edge, but not quite as much edge as the Griffin Rockport audio system that I was listening to. That had more like energy, more drive, and more authority and power and grrr about it. But this system was closer to that compared to the Avantgarde horn system, System 1. So like I said, this is really like a mixture of the two, kind of almost the best of both worlds. Yes, it doesn't take you quite as far this way. Yes, it doesn't take you quite as far that way. So not as big, not as much scale. the other system, not as much raw energy, like more raw live. Wow, I'm listening to a performer energy that you get from the Griffin pre-power. Not quite the same here, but almost to that kind of level. So yeah, very, very impressive stuff. So it's time to close out this video then. I came here asking the question, what does a dream hi-fi system look like? And since I started this YouTube channel, of course, I've got to travel. I've got to see lots of amazing hi-fi systems. But it's not very often you get to see really, really high-end hi-fi systems like this, really. So it's always interesting. It's always a learning curve to spend real time, proper time, sitting in a good seat, listening to systems like this. I think it's important to appreciate and understand what this hi-fi show is all about. It's about extreme hi-fi systems, pushing the boundaries, trying to take sound quality as far as it can go. And of course, that means the systems that are on display are massively aspirational to 99.9% of people, including me. But I think even though that's the case, you know, getting the opportunity and the experience of listening to systems at this level is massively useful, because every day's a school day in life, as we know, and especially in hi-fi, because I think there's things you forget. There's certain characteristics or qualities of hi-fi or music reproduction performance that we can forget about, because we can get quite pigeonholed, I think, by our own systems and our own personal experience and preference, that we can forget that sometimes it's important to listen to different things, because that helps us learn and understand maybe what we might want to add, I think, to our own systems. And that has really been the benefit of coming here for me personally, getting to hear 3.1 really different systems, very different sound presentations, different manufacturers, different ways of doing things. And I've just got to say, you know, congratulations to the Ultimate Audio guys, because they have put together 3.1 phenomenal systems, literally phenomenal. But of course, people are going to want to know what would be my favorite system out of the 3.1. And normally that's really easy for me. Normally you can just go, yeah, that's the one that really stood out to me this weekend. But that's really not the case at all. I would find it really very difficult to choose between these systems. But let's face it, if you've got any of these systems here, if you can afford and own any of these systems here, there is no loser here. That, you know, every single system's a winner. It's just very different. I think the biggest surprise to me in terms of positive experience was the Audionec EVO 2 speakers that you can see just there behind me. As I said in that piece of the video, I've never heard speakers present music quite like that. It's definitely different. I like it, and it would be a sound that I could listen to more and more, and I wouldn't mind, you know, exploring more, hopefully at some point in the future. So I just want to close out the video with a huge thank you to the team at Ultimate Audio for hosting me. This is the second time they've hosted me and allowed me to come here and create a video for their event. It's been absolutely fantastic. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have enjoyed the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel to see more. Hit that thumbs up.